I just found places in the US where your grocery bill could be half of what you are paying right now. I mean, it does not sound real, right? We're talking about 10 states where food costs are way below the national average. And I'm not talking about weird discount stores or some off-brand stuff. No, fresh produce, meats, snacks, even your favorite brands, all way cheaper than the national average. Of course, there is usually a reason it is this cheap. Maybe it is the cost of living, local oddities, or maybe some places really are still affordable. Imagine that. Either way, by the end of this video, you'll be questioning why you've been paying so much in the first place. So stick around, hit subscribe if saving money sounds good to you, and let's see if these states are just cheap or if there is more to it. 10. Georgia. Starting off at number 10 is Georgia. Groceries here are about 5% cheaper than the national average, and while that might not sound like a lot, it adds up fast. If you're used to shelling out $600 a month for food, imagine paying closer to $570 instead. Over a year, that's enough extra cash to cover gas, new tires, or a few date nights. But here's the catch. Georgia isn't a uniformly cheap state. Atlanta's growing fast, and with growth comes higher housing and transportation costs. So, while groceries do give your budget a break, you might find that other expenses sneak up on you. On the other hand, in smaller towns or rural areas, those grocery savings feel even more dramatic. A trip to a local farmer's market in Macon or Savannah not only gets you fresher produce, but often at prices that make you double-check the receipt, wondering if the cashier forgot to ring something up. Georgia's real perk is that it gives you that combination of southern flavor and subtle financial breathing room. You won't get rich from the grocery savings here, but it does make everyday life less of a grind. And if you think shaving 5% off your grocery bill is nice, the next state takes it up a notch. 9. Tennessee. Groceries cost around 6% less than the national average here. For a family, that's hundreds of dollars back in your pocket every year. But living here isn't all sunshine and barbecue. Nashville's boom has made parts of the state pricier, and traffic in the big cities can drain both your patience and your gas tank. Still, the overall cost of living stays lower, and groceries consistently reflect that. In smaller towns, your grocery trips can feel like a steal compared to national norms. Here's the thing about Tennessee. The savings aren't flashy, but they're steady. That's what makes life here feel a little easier. You're not staring at the register total, wondering how basic essentials got so expensive. Instead, you've got a bit more breathing room for other things, like family outings, home repairs, or even just keeping some extra money tucked away. Tennessee is proof that not paying too much can be just as powerful as getting a great deal. And if Tennessee feels like a solid bargain, the next state will show you what happens when you live right in the heart of America's food supply. 8. Kansas. Groceries here are about 7% cheaper than the national average, and that difference is easier to understand when you think about where your food is actually coming from. Kansas is the breadbasket of America, literally. Wheat, corn, cattle, it's all right here. When food doesn't have to travel far, you don't get hit with the same markups you'll find on the coasts. For families, this means weekly grocery runs don't feel quite as painful. If you're spending $1,000 a month somewhere else, in Kansas it might be closer to $930. That's the kind of difference you notice not just on paper, but in how your paycheck stretches from one month to the next. But let's be fair, Kansas isn't everyone's dream state. The weather can be harsh, the landscape is flat, and in smaller towns you might not have a dozen different grocery chains to pick from. Still, most Kansans don't mind the trade-off. The affordability of daily life, especially groceries, makes living here practical, predictable, and financially calmer than in much of the country. And if Kansas felt impressive, you are not gonna believe what the next state is offering. 7. Oklahoma. Coming in at number 7 is Oklahoma, where groceries are about 7.1% below the national average. That might sound similar to Kansas, but the feel of the savings is a little different here. Oklahoma is one of those states where nearly everything costs less: rent, gas, utilities. So when your grocery bill comes in lighter too, the effect is amplified. It's not just, hey, I saved $70 this month. It's more like, wow, life here is consistently affordable. Still, Oklahoma isn't without challenges. The weather can be brutal, tornadoes, heat waves, you name it. And in smaller towns, job opportunities aren't as abundant, which can make those savings feel less impactful depending on your situation. But if you're raising a family or just trying to get by on a modest income, Oklahoma's lower grocery costs are a steady relief. That difference might not make your jaw drop in the moment, but over weeks, months, and years, it's like finding extra cash you didn't know you had. It's the kind of place where affordability becomes part of the culture. You're not competing to outspend your neighbors. You're simply living in a state where things cost less. And the next state, our number 6, has its own way of making groceries easier on the wallet. 6. Indiana. Groceries here run about 7.1% cheaper than the national average, which is right in line with Oklahoma. But Indiana has a slightly different feel. For one, it's more urbanized in parts. Indianapolis, for example, has a different vibe than rural towns. Yet across the board, the grocery bill is easier to manage than in much of the country. For families, that 7% drop means more flexibility. You might not feel it all at once, but when you've got a growing grocery list, pet food, weekly dinners, snacks for the kids, that lower total makes a real difference. It's not that you're suddenly rich, but it takes some pressure off, and that pressure relief matters. Of course, Indiana has its downsides too. Winters are long and gray, and depending on where you live, the job market might not be as vibrant as in other states. But if you're just looking at the everyday grind of feeding yourself and your family, Indiana gives you a break. What's interesting about Indiana is how it balances affordability with accessibility. You've got options, big chain stores, local markets, even roadside stands in the summer, and yet the bill stays below the national average. It's not glamorous, but it's practical, and that's what most people want. So, would you give Indiana a chance? Drop it in the comments down below. 5. Kentucky. Groceries here cost about 7.2% less than the national average, which means a typical family might see their grocery bill drop by $70 a month. Over a year, that's roughly $840, not something to sneeze at, especially when combined with Kentucky's generally lower cost of living. What's interesting about Kentucky is how regional differences affect that saving. In Louisville or Lexington, you'll have access to big chains and a variety of options, while prices can be a little higher than in smaller towns. But unlike some states where only rural areas are cheap, Kentucky's grocery affordability is fairly consistent across the state. Now, to be honest, life in Kentucky isn't all perfect grocery deals and Bourbon tour. Winters can be damp and gray, and some rural communities face economic challenges like limited job opportunities. But for a family on a budget, that $70 a month can make the difference between scraping by and having a little breathing room, whether that's paying off bills, saving for a trip, or just treating yourself to a nice dinner out. One thing that makes Kentucky stand out is the combination of affordability and accessibility. You can find a local farmer's market on Saturday morning, get fresh vegetables, and still walk out with your bill lower than you would in most states. And if Kentucky feels practical, wait until the next state makes number 4 on our list. For Arkansas, grocery prices here are about 7.3% below the national average, which translates to around $75 saved per month for an average family. That's roughly $900 a year. Not life-changing overnight, but definitely noticeable when you get to the checkout line month after month. In Little Rock, prices might creep slightly higher, but in smaller towns, grocery costs can feel downright generous. You're not just saving a few dollars here and there. It's enough to offset other expenses like gas, utilities, or weekend outings. Arkansas has a reputation for being quiet, and in some places it can feel isolated. Public transportation is limited, and certain services that are easy to find in bigger states might be harder to access. Still, for someone who values living cheaply and doesn't mind a slower pace of life, Arkansas delivers. Another interesting point is that the grocery savings here are steady, and it is one of the states with the lowest inflation. That predictability makes it easier to plan your budget. Imagine finishing your weekly shop and realizing your bill is consistently $15 lower than a comparable city elsewhere. Over a year, That's hundreds of dollars you didn't have to fight for, a small but steady reward for living here. 3. Mississippi. At number 3, we've got Mississippi. Groceries in this state are about 7.6% cheaper than the national average, which for a family of 4 could mean around $80 saved per month. Rural communities, where local markets and small grocery chains dominate, often see even better prices. It's one of those places where the cost of food is consistently more manageable, making it easier to budget month to month without feeling squeezed. Of course, Mississippi isn't without its downsides. Certain areas struggle economically, healthcare access can be limited, and wages tend to be lower than the national average. So while your groceries may be cheaper, other costs or limitations may balance out some of those gains. But if you're looking purely at how much your grocery dollars go further, Mississippi is a standout. You can try new recipes, buy fresh produce without worrying, or simply feel less stress at the checkout. And if saving nearly 8% on groceries sounds good, wait until you see number 2. It's where affordability really starts to get jaw-dropping. 2. Michigan. Groceries here are about 8.5% cheaper than the national average, which means a family could save close to $85 every month. That's over $1,000 a year, enough to cover insurance or a small vacation. Michigan has a mix of urban and rural areas, which affects how those savings show up. Cities like Detroit might be slightly more expensive, but the state as a whole consistently beats the national average. Plus, Michigan benefits from strong local agriculture, particularly in fruits, vegetables, and dairy, which helps keep costs reasonable. Of course, Michigan has challenges. Winters can be brutal, with snowstorms and icy roads, and some parts of the state are still recovering from economic shifts over the past decades. Housing costs and taxes can be high in certain areas, which offsets some of the grocery savings. But if you focus on the food bill, Michigan delivers. It's that balance that makes Michigan interesting. You get decent grocery prices, a variety of cities and towns to live in, and the comfort of knowing your budget stretches a little further. And if Michigan's 8.5% savings impresses you, wait until you see number 1. It's a state where every grocery run feels like a victory for your wallet. 1. Texas. And finally, number 1 is Texas. Groceries here are about 10% cheaper than the national average, which for a typical family could mean around $100 saved per month. That's roughly $1,200 a year, a big enough difference to notice when you check out. Part of what keeps prices down is Texas's size and self-sufficiency. It's not just about oil and cattle. Texas produces a lot of its own food, and distribution within the state is massive. Grocery giants like H-E-B, beloved by Texans like family, keep competition fierce and prices fair. Even in bigger cities like Houston or San Antonio, you'll find groceries cheaper than the national norm. But let's not sugarcoat it. Texas does come with trade-offs. Property taxes can sting, summers can feel like you're living in an oven, and traffic in Dallas or Austin will test anyone's patience. Still, when it comes to feeding your family, Texas gives you a break that few other states can match. What really makes it stand out is how normal it feels. You're not clipping endless coupons or driving to 3 different stores to chase sales. You shop, you pay, and you walk out with the sense that, for once, you actually got a fair deal. And in a country where grocery bills often feel like punishment, that's a rare win worth celebrating.